Hey people, so we're going to walk through this code for this to-do app for two reasons. One, it helps me solidify what I've learned, and it can help you to figure out if you're building your first to-do app. Okay. So we got this to-do app, pretty straightforward. There's three components in here. Okay, I reloaded so it's reconnecting. Okay. This section right here, the welcome and instructions are a component. The title of the to-do, the title of the to-dos and the actual to-do list is a component, and then the form is a third component. There is actually a fourth component. The actual individual to-dos are components, so I guess those are technically on this page too, right? But you'll see why I didn't say it as the part of this page in a second. Yeah, so each one of these, the laundry, the shop, or whatever we add is also technically a component too. So let's take a look. Of course, we're in the app.js. As with all things React here, we have to import React, right? We have to import our components that we're using. They are in, this is just the path to where they live. You can see over here they're in a separate folder called components, and within that they are in to-do components. Seems a little complicated for this, but if you had some other more complicated app that did something besides to-dos, you would have a separate, let's say you had a calendar, you could have calendar components all inside your components folder. So that's why it's structured that way. Some CSS put into. Okay, so this is the main page, the main component, the app component. And it has some state, which is our list of to-dos. State is just a list. All it is just a list of to-dos. So it's an array of objects. Each to-do is an object that has a couple properties on it. The actual to-do task, and we gave it, I started it with one to-do, which is my laundry, and we gave it an ID because it's going to need an unique ID. Date.now, when you call that, gives you a more or less unique number, because it's in milliseconds since some day in 1970, January 1st, maybe, I forget. But so unless you're clicking faster than a millisecond, it's going to give you a unique date, a unique number, and it has a Boolean of whether or not it is completed. So that's what so it's a list of objects like that, of to-do objects. Here's some methods, some handlers. We're going to skip that for a moment. We're going to look at layout here. So you see I have the three components I was talking about. The title, which actually is the title and instructions, right? The to-do list, which, like I mentioned, actually displays the individual to-do components, but we'll get into that too. And then the to-do form. Okay, so let's start with the simplest one, the title component. And it's really didn't use a stateful component here because it's really unnecessary. There's nothing going on there. I say it's just a header and a list of instructions. Very simple. No JavaScript, so to speak. I mean, it's all technically JavaScript, right? But you know what I mean. Let's look at the to-do form next. So jump around a little bit. So we had, like I said, let's take a look. We have the input and the to-do button, which is part of a form element. And this completed to-do button is actually outside of the actual form. And the reason we did it that way is because I wanted to be able to submit the form by hitting enter as well as clicking. And if you had this inside the form as well, it wouldn't know which thing is submitting when you enter. Okay, I'll explain that in a minute if that's not clear. So the form from here to here, right? Okay, so that's where we're looking. Forget the onSubmit for a second. div with the class name. This is some bootstrap stuff just to give it that styling. Okay. Here's actual input type of text. Again, this form controls a bootstrap thing. A value. What's the value of it right now? It says placeholder, but that's not really a value. If you enter, nothing's happening. It's just showing up there. So what's the value of this thing right now? Is an empty string, technically, right? And so how does it know that? What is this? This.props.current to do. All right. So we know that it's getting props is coming from here, which means it's getting props is information that's coming from its parent, right? Parent component. The parent component of to do form is in fact app, right? Because here it is, to do form. So what are we sending it? Current to do. There it is. This.state.current to do, right? Which when we start is an empty string. So that makes sense. We're saying the state for current to do is an empty string. I'm going to send you this current to do, which is an empty string. And then we're saying, hey, for the value, send this empty string. So it makes perfect sense. But we're going to change that right here, on change. Okay. So what happens when we do something in here? We change it, right? And if you noticed over here, suddenly the current to do value was, let's see, watch it again. It's empty string. That's what it started with, right? As soon as you change it, it's going to change that state. Every time you press a button or something, press a key, I should say, that you can see that the state changes. So how did that happen, right? That happens over here because we told it to. On change, do this.props.handle input change. So again, this.props means it's coming from the parent. What is handle input change that lives up here? Okay, let's find it and take a look. Handle input change is a function, doing an anonymous function that takes an event. Anytime there's something happening on the page, there's an event object that has a lot of information on it, like what key was pressed, all kinds of stuff, more than we'll use for a simple thing like this. But anyway, one of the things is the target of the event, like what it is, where did the event happen, right? The target and the value of it. So what we're saying here, we told it. Let's go back here for a second. They said when this changes on change, do this thing, right? This handle input change. And again, handle input change is saying take that event, okay? Or maybe it should say, given that event, that object with this information, do this thing. You're going to set state, right? So in React, you can't just modify the state directly. You have to use this set state function. So we're going to set state, and we're going to change the current to do to event.target. Here's the event that got sent to us. The target is that input box, and the value is whatever we put in there, right? So then instead of that being an empty string, the state up here, right, the current to do being an empty string, changes from the empty string to whatever the target value is over here, right? And you can see that over here in the state. You'll see every time it changes, the state changes. Because what's so in the React tools here, let me show you what this state is actually referring to. It's not looking, the to-do list doesn't have a state. The state is all the way up on the parent in the app. This is showing letters like that because this is the a build version, right? So it'll be more clear if I had done it on a development version. This would say, app or something. But the point is, this is the most parent component, and that's where that state was. And it started with the current to do, which is on the state being empty. And every time we change it, it goes up to the parent component and changes the state. Pretty cool. All right, then what happens? So back to our to-do form. So here's the button we're still inside the form. Here's the button. Again, this is some bootstrap stuff. add to do. Okay, this is nothing particularly special here, but it's inside the form. So when you click the button or press the enter, it does on submit, right? So just like we did here, here's this function that we used, the handle input change. Now we're doing the handle the submit. Instead of just handling the changing the value, we're handling what happens when you hit submit. Click submit or hit enter, right? So again, that's being passed down as props from the parent component, which is the app. So where's handle submit? Here's handle submit. Again, it takes the event. Normally when you do submit, it wants to refresh the page or go to a different page. So we're saying, no, don't do that. We're going to handle it all right here in React. So that's the prevent default. So it's taking the event, again, just like we did over here, which has a bunch of information attached to it. Okay, and we're going to make a new event object. Not the event object that gets passed up here. This is like a local event object. We're making this one up on our own. That only has these 3 properties. It doesn't have all the properties of like the DOM event. Okay, so we're saying that the completed is going to be false because we just added it. We haven't completed it yet. We're making a new one, right? We wouldn't add a completed to do. It starts off not complete, so completed is false. Again, I talked about before, we want to give it a unique ID. So that's how we get that, is give it the date.now, which gives us a number in milliseconds, and the actual task, the actual to-do. And again, this.state current to-do, that is whatever's in that input field. Just like over here, the current to-do right here. So this.state right here, this is the one in the parent, this.state current to do. So whatever it is at that moment is going to get added to this object that we're creating, right? And then again, just like this, where we said set state, what was the other thing that was on the state? We had the to-do array, the current to-do, which we were talking about, and the actual array, the to-do array, the actual list of tasks, right? So we're saying take this event object, our local event object that we made, and run set state using that. Change the to-do array. If you're not familiar with this syntax, it's just saying take all the objects that are, or the items that are in the array, the state, this.state.to-do array, and put them in here, in this new array, and add this new event object, which is what we just created, to the end of the list. Okay, so it's basically just, you could do it with what is it, slice or splice or something, but I forget. But this way is much nicer in my opinion. So you're just taking the old array, the objects from the old array, putting them in a new array, and adding our one we just created on the end. And we want to clear out the whatever's in the input box. We don't want to leave it there once we've added to the list. That's what this does. It changes the current to do to back to nothing. You see what I mean? This has, let's do something better than that. Rake leaves. You don't want to leave that rake leaves in the input box after you hit enter. So by changing it to the empty string, it empties it back. So this is empty. This is just that placeholder text, right? That's not real data. Okay, so now we've got a list of to-dos. And we can see that that to-do array has 3 items. And each one of them is completed, false, right? They're all, we still have to do them all, okay? They all have a different ID and then the actual task. So we want to be able to do is when we want to show that they're completed before we get rid of them, okay? When we click it, it goes to being strike through in the text, and over here on the state we've changed its property to completed. So how did that happen, right? Let's take a look. That is going to be over here in the to-do form. We told it handle submit, handle input change value. Let's see, where was that? Okay, that's got to be sorry, just lost my train of thought. We wanted to change the completed to true. So when we're clicking on the, that's into the individual to do. That's why I was got a little color. So we're finally going to talk about the individual to dos. So every time we add something to that list, ooh, all right, let's back it up here, Alex, a little bit. To do list. This is the one that displays the actual, takes that array, the list of the actual items in the to do array, and displays them individually on the screen. We got to talk about this first, okay, before we get to the clicking the completed. Sorry for that. So here we go. Again, just some Bootstrap stuff. So then we're displaying over here this.props.todo array. Okay. Again, that's just like before. We have from the parent component, we have the to-do array, which is the list of the actual list of to-dos. And we're going to use the map array method map, which takes all your items in an array and makes a new array out of it, but it does something to each item in the array before it makes the new array. So it goes through the array one item at a time. Takes the first thing, does something you told it to do, pops it into a new array. Maybe it'd be more appropriate to say pushes it into a new array. At any rate, and so here's how it works. So you do .map and it takes a function, right? So we're going to say for each to-do item, give me this. And what we're telling it to give us, instead of just that object that we had, because it was the object had the actual to-do task, it had an ID, and it had a Boolean for completed or not. We're saying give us a new array, a different array. You can keep all that stuff. That's fine. Hold on to that, right? We want a different one that's going to be a component. Each one is going to be a component, our individual to-do component. And it's going to have some properties. Whenever you make a list of things like this, it needs to get, React wants a key. That's why we needed this unique ID, and we used that timestamp. It's a list because it's this individual one doesn't look like a list, but as we add them, we're adding them to a list, so we need to have the key. And we're using the to-do item.id, and the task is the to-do item, right? This is we're sending it the whole to-do item, okay? Not just the ID. Here we're just giving it the ID. Here we're sending it the whole item, and we'll do something with that in a minute. Handle item click. This.props.handle item click. So let's take a look at that for a second. You know what? Let's not do that. We'll come back to the clicking. Let's figure out why we're sending the whole to-do item down. So the whole to-do item is what I was talking about. Here we just grabbed the ID off it, right? Here the to-do item is referring to the whole thing, the task, the ID, and the completed Boolean. So over here, each individual to-do component gets all three of those. So here's the individual to-do component. Forget about the clicking part for a second. This is saying telling us if it's completed, or if it's not completed, give us this version. If it is completed, give us this. So it starts off not completed. So let's look at this first. So it's a list item that has an on-click property, right? But it also has this.props.task. So this was, all right, so remember I just said it got the whole task object, right? We just want from that whole task the actual task, not the ID, not the completed Boolean, right? So that's where it gets the laundry or shopping or rake the leaves part. That's this.props.task, that task. I probably could have named that a little better because that's a little confusing, but hopefully you can follow, okay? So this one tells it if this.props.task, that's the whole to-do, right? And we want to know, is it completed? If it's or not completed, that's what the bang here, right, is, right? So if it's not completed, which is generally what's going to happen when you give it a new to-do, it's not completed yet, right? It's going to render this for each individual component. It's going to say it's not completed, and here's the task. And here's what you can do. So here's finally getting into this part. When I click it, right? Okay, when I click it, Here's the onClick for that individual thing. Do this.props.handle item click. Okay, so then again, we're getting this as props, so it's coming from a parent. This.props.task.id. So we have to know, okay, why does it need this? Because there's more than one item in that list. And here's another reason we need the ID, right? We're clicking a bunch. There's a lot of things in that list. Well, this is saying, well, which one are you clicking? I need to know. So we're telling it. It's the one that has the whatever ID I clicked on. Okay, so then handle the click on that one is right here. So this.props.handle item click. It's going to be in the to-do list as the parent. But this is saying, oh, handle item click, here it is. Oh, actually go up another level, because here's really where it is. This.props. I also have handle item, this.props.handle item click. I don't have it. It's actually in my parent. So it's up 2 levels, right? So it's way up here. Handle item click. So it's taking the ID, which we sent up, so we knew which item it was. And we're doing set state again. Just like we did over here with the spread, we're creating a new array. And again, we're mapping over it, similarly to what we did before. We're saying if the to-do ID equals the ID that we just sent up with it, we're going to change the completed Boolean to whatever the opposite of the completed Boolean was. So to-do.completed, to-do.completed. Well, when you put a bang in front of it, it just means the opposite. If it's true, make it false. If it's false, make it true, right? And then give it back. So we're making a new array. The only thing that's changing when we do the map the array this time, it's going to be exactly the same. All this is saying is just flip the Boolean for the completed, back and forth. And if it's not equal to the one that we asked you for, don't do anything to it. Leave the rest of the array alone. So we're just getting a new array back, and we're just changing that one we clicked and toggling it. It's basically just a little toggle switch, an on-off switch. That's all it is. Okay, so all that being said, where were we? I think we were talking about clicking these guys. So again, if it's off, turn it on. If it's on, turn it off when you click. So we click it, gets completed. Click it, gets uncompleted. And you can see that over here in the state, changing from false to true, false to true, true to false, false to true. Okay, so then we got that going on. Where were we? To do form, I think. Okay. Finally, when we have, I think we took care of all of that. I sort of lost track a little bit. It's a little wild there, but I think we're on this part. Okay, so we have the clear completed. This is the button that's outside of the form. When we have all these things displayed and we decide whether or not they're completed, we can say, well, okay, enough of that. You want to get it out of the way. I knocked it off my list, but I'm still keeping track. All right, I'm done for the day. Let's clear everything that I actually got done. Just clear it off the list and leave the stuff that I still have to do. So I did my laundry, I did some shopping, but I didn't get around to raking the leaves. So let's clear the completed to-dos. We click this button and gets rid of them. Okay, and you can see that the current to-do is set back to nothing. The to-do array only has one item, and it's still completed is false. Okay, so what did that clear completed to-dos actually do? This.props.handle clear completed. Okay, so again, that's from the parent. The parent of the to-do form. It's from the parent. We know it's from the parent because it's from this.props. The props come from the parent, right? So that's the app. This.handle clear completed. And all it's saying is we're not really giving it any information, but we're saying set the state. The to-do array is going to be a new array, and we're going to run the dot filter on it. Okay, so filter is kind of like map, where it takes each item in an array and does something to it. Not exactly, though. Instead of doing something to it, it says, is this true or is this false? And if it's true, I'll give you the item into the new array. If it's false, I'm keeping it, or I'm not doing anything with it. I'm not going to add it to your new array. So we're saying if the to-do happens to be to-do.completed is not true, I guess I could have said is false, right? Um, send it back to my new array, which we're immediately putting into the to-do array. Okay? That's a complicated way of saying it. I probably should have said equals false, but I don't want to mess around with it here. So you could think of it either way. I've seen people do this both ways. I don't know why I did it this way this time. Anyway, filter. Just like map, it goes through each array item and says if it passes the test, puts it in a new array. If it doesn't pass the test, it does not get put in a new array. So it goes through and it says anything that had a false, I'm going to knock it off the list. Anything that's true is going to stay on this new array and be part of the original array. Okay, and that's really it, right? So every time you do one of those, the state changes, so it re-renders the list. That's something important thing in React. When state changes, it re-renders things that are using that piece of state. Doesn't have to re-render everything on the page. It goes through and it says, ooh, you had this piece of state you need to change. You didn't, you can kind of stay, right? So I think that's it. Hopefully that is a clear explanation. If anybody has any kind of questions about any part of that, please feel free to reach out to me. If there's a better way to do some of these things, I'm happy to hear it. I saw some things in there. I mentioned that maybe I should do a different way myself already. But I hope this is useful to someone else who is working on a to-do app. Don't get fooled by these haters who say, oh, to-do apps are boring. If you've never done one before, it's an important thing. You're going to learn something by doing it. Don't feel like you're... I read some of these articles and they're like, oh, you're lame if you're doing a to-do app. But another to-do app, you know what? If you've never done one before, it's a great way to, learn these methods and the way these information flows around. So hopefully this helps somebody, and I will see you in my next video. Again, feel free to reach out with any kind of questions. I'll be happy to try to answer them. Okay? Alrighty. Bye, everyone.